Okay, so if you listen to the official government reports right now, everything is, well, absolutely fine. Unemployment is hovering right around 4%, job growth seems strong on the surface, and GDP just keeps taking upward. But there is a massive, frankly bizarre paradox happening here. Because if all of those official metrics are true, why does the everyday reality of financial struggle feel so crushing for so many of us? Why does it feel like things are just cracking under the surface? In this explainer, we're going to look strictly at the data to uncover the actual reality hiding behind those official numbers. Okay, let's dive right into this. Because, this is a question so many people are asking themselves when they look at their grocery bills, check their paychecks, and then look back at those incredibly cheerful news headlines. It is so validating to know that if you're feeling the squeeze, it's absolutely not just in your head. The whole premise we're unpacking today is that the economic data simply hasn't caught up to our lived reality yet. A recession isn't necessarily coming, the numbers strongly suggest we might actually be living in one right now. To understand how that is even possible, we first have to look at how downturns are recorded. Section 1. The retroactive recession, declared after the fact. Historically, there's a really clear pattern here. The National Bureau of Economic Research, or NBER, is the official body that declares recessions. But they don't announce a recession while it's actually happening. They require comprehensive data confirmation first. Just look at the dot-com crash. It began in March 2001, but wasn't officially declared until November, a full 8 months later. Or the devastating 2008 financial crisis. That recession actually started in December 2007, but the NBER didn't make it official until December 2008. That's a full year later, way after Lehman Brothers had already collapsed. Recessions are almost always declared 6 to 18 months retroactively, meaning we could literally be deep into one right now, and the official label just hasn't been printed yet. Let's move on and see how this builds into our current situation. Section 2, the employment illusion hiding the real numbers. Right now, the unemployment rate sits around 4.4%. On the surface, that sounds like a relatively low, super healthy number. You hear that and you naturally think, great, everyone who wants a job has one. But this single number creates a massive blind spot because of a very specific rule in how it's calculated. It only counts active job seekers. If you haven't applied for a job in the last 4 weeks, you are entirely invisible to this 4.4% statistic. And that invisibility, it's hiding a much larger issue. Consider the missing workers. Since the pandemic, more than 1.6 million Americans have simply stopped looking for work. They haven't found jobs, they've just given up. And because they aren't actively searching, they have completely disappeared from the official unemployment statistics. At the same time, labor force participation has dropped by 1.5% compared to pre-pandemic levels. So while that low unemployment headline is constantly cheered, underneath it is a steady drift of people totally abandoning the workforce, effectively masking a shrinking labor pool. And for the people who are working, we really have to look at the accounting magic being used to measure job growth. If a company lays off one full-time worker, and that person ends up having to take 2 separate part-time gig jobs just to stay afloat, the government registers that as 2 jobs added. That literally equals net job growth on paper. Across the economy, secure, full-time positions are being systematically replaced by multiple part-time roles that totally lack benefits, security, or matching income. Yet, the official statistics celebrate this as a growing, healthy labor market. Which brings us to a really staggering reality. Right now, there are 4.4 million Americans working part-time, specifically because they can't find full-time work. They're technically employed, sure, but financially they're in an incredibly precarious position. To put this in perspective, total net new jobs for 2025 only sat at 181,000. So we have millions settling for part-time survival while the actual full-time job engine stalls out completely. If the jobs getting created offer fewer benefits, how are everyday people actually surviving? Well, that brings us to Section 3, the consumer debt trap, borrowing to survive. Now, what's really interesting about this is this single percentage. Cumulative inflation has risen over 25% since 2020. That means the cost of simply existing, groceries, rent, gas, is a quarter more expensive than it was just a few years ago. And real income has absolutely not kept pace with that. So people are being forced into a very tough spot where they have to hold their lifestyles together, not with their paychecks, but with debt. And here is the really heavy hit that results from all that inflation. Credit card debt hit a record-breaking $1.28 trillion at the end of 2025. Americans are no longer swiping their cards just for convenience or airline miles. They're borrowing just to cover basic daily necessities. This is what you might call plastic poison, especially when you consider that the average interest rate on these cards is currently hovering around a staggering 22%. This just perfectly highlights the disconnect we've been talking about. The standard media narrative looks at the data and goes, look, consumer spending remains strong, the economy is thriving. But the economic reality on the ground is entirely different. Consumers are spending more strictly because things cost more, and they are borrowing more to pay for them, not because they're earning more. It's a temporary debt-fueled solution that is actively creating a much, much larger systemic problem. You can actually see the sheer exhaustion of the consumer right here in the personal savings rate. Historically, Americans have saved an average of about 8% of their income. Today, that rate has plummeted to just 4.5%. Households are stretching themselves unbelievably thin. What is vital to understand here is that this specific drop in savings, paired with rising debt just to maintain a baseline lifestyle, is textbook pre-recession behavior. It's the exact same movie we saw play out right before the 2007 crash. And these cracks aren't just isolated to the consumer's wallet, they're spreading straight into the corporate sector. Section 4, Corporate Warning, Cracks in the System. Let's look at the Leading Economic Index, or LEI. This is a metric specifically designed by economists to forecast the economy and predict recessions. Right now, the LEI has declined for 6 consecutive months. This isn't just a random blip. This exact 6-month consecutive decline is the precise pattern that flashed right before both the 2001 dot-com recession and the 2008 financial crisis were officially declared. Furthermore, commercial bankruptcies have risen over 7%, pushing past 24,000 filings. Guys, this is the highest level we've seen in over a decade. During the pandemic era, a lot of companies survived on cheap, easy financing. But now that economic conditions have tightened and that cheap money is totally gone, the squeeze is on and businesses are folding at an accelerating rate. So let's put this all together. Labor force participation is falling, purchasing power is shrinking, savings are vanishing, credit debt is piling up, and corporate bankruptcies are rising. Think of this like the dashboard of your car. If just one light comes on, maybe it's a sensor glitch, a false alarm. But when your check engine light, your oil pressure warning, and your brake lights all illuminate simultaneously, you don't ignore it. This constellation of indicators lighting up all at once tells us something fundamentally deep is shifting. Which brings us to the root cause of why everything feels so completely disconnected. Section 5, Goodhart's Law, Metrics as Targets. We just keep coming back to this million-dollar question, don't we? If all those warning lights on the dashboard are flashing red, why do the headline numbers published by the government still look green? The answer lies in the fact that our systems for measuring the economy were created way back in the 1940s, and over the decades, they have been systematically revised, tweaked, and adjusted in ways that unintentionally or intentionally hide the real cracks. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly how those cracks are hidden within our official metrics. The official unemployment rate treats 1 single hour of driving for DoorDash exactly the same as a 40-hour salaried engineering job. You get put in the exact same employed bucket. Or look at GDP, the ultimate measure of economic growth. GDP counts a dollar spent from an expanding credit card balance exactly the same as a dollar spent from actual wage growth. These methods create massive blind spots where terrible economic realities can easily hide behind seemingly positive data. This whole phenomenon is perfectly captured by Goodhart's Law. It's the principle that the very moment a metric becomes a target, it stops being a good metric. Once institutions, policymakers, and politicians start optimizing their actions just to hit a specific target number, they totally stop optimizing for reality. The goal basically shifts from fixing the real-world problem to simply fixing the spreadsheet. So the absolutely crucial point is this. We're no longer measuring the economy itself, we are just managing the metrics used to measure it. Unemployment policy becomes all about lowering the headline percentage rather than actually improving job quality. Economic policy focuses on maximizing output for GDP rather than increasing the actual well-being of citizens. Inflation measures focus on managing the specific index rather than reducing your actual cost of living at the grocery store. And this is exactly why the data drifts further and further away from what you actually experience day to day. But, once you see this illusion, it's pretty much impossible to unsee. You can start looking past it with a few simple steps. When the media celebrates job growth, immediately ask about job quality. Are these full-time or part-time gigs? When they brag about wage growth, check it against that 25% cumulative inflation. And when consumer spending looks incredibly strong, immediately check the credit card debt data. The real economy leaves clues. Recessions hide in the exact gap between measurement and reality, until they're simply too obvious to ignore. The constellation of signals is forming a pattern that has historically always preceded major economic downturns. The NBER will eventually make it official, for sure, but by then it's just going to be confirmation of what we've already lived through. So I'll leave you with this. When the dust finally settles and the official numbers align with the reality on the ground, who will be prepared and who will be blindsided? Are you spotting these exact trends in your own daily life? Because ultimately, the best, most accurate economic data comes from the people actually living in it, not just those measuring it. Thanks for joining me for this explainer. Keep your eyes open and keep asking the right questions.